Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're checking out a Vengeance Blood list for Unlimited. I think we checked out Vengeance Blood not that long ago, but this one is fairly different as far as cards. I don't remember cards being the variant, if they were. But this does look at least fresh and new to me since it's been a while. Overall, this deck is fairly consistent and uses a very similar engine to the old Vengeance Blood lists, of course, replacing a few of those old cards like Urias with the new Urias, Swarming Wraith, Overambling Wraith, Azazel as more of a Belf play lineup sort of thing. But a lot of the other core cards ran in this deck serve very similar purposes. Entrancing Blow is very similar to running Snarling Chains in most situations. Dual Blame is actually fairly new, not really replacing anything that I can think of. Hellblaze is just a pretty standard buff, and then of course your Dark Air Jammers, some draw power. Basically every card in this deck is more focused around like the old cards were, just with a new coat of paint, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually fairly good for a deck to keep it more viable. So it's nice to see Vengeance Blood climbing itself back up into the top echelons of the Unlimited ladder. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it, and we'll get right into it and check it out. So, unfortunately, a couple of these games I think are very average with fairly early concedes, but I do have one really nice game in this set of games to show you guys, and I think we're actually going to cover 3 all up, so that should be okay as far as this deck being reasonably quick. Unfortunately, being a bit sick and trying to get these videos done so that I don't have to make a few for a couple of days really does make things a bit more difficult. Since of course you can probably hear my voice being a bit off. So turn 2 we're probably looking at a card like Swarming Wraith, as it's probably one of the better cards you can do on turn 2. You're not really worried about getting down to 10 too much, since most of your other cards support doing that. Usually you want to make sure you're playing Belf or Azazel to do that, and that's really the best way to go about things. Fortunately for us, we get a really nice turn to drop some draw power, plus you can never say no to 2/1/1 bats. Conjure Guardian, not actually a problem for us, fortunately. It's not the best thing to have to remove, but it could be worse. I did decide to forego playing Azazel though, since it just wouldn't have been good enough, I don't think, and I don't mind just replaying the Swarming with a buff on it, plus going for the Evo there, since Evos aren't really a thing this deck needs a lot of. You only really need at least the one for the Azazel play. Otherwise, the others are pretty free just for damage purposes. Absolute Zero Blade, and the Owl was fairly good. Luckily though, the Azazel now is the perfect play, since it does kill off the Owl, no problem, and set us up nicely for our Vengeance, which right about now is when you want it. About turn 5 is where Vengeance becomes really crazy. Of course, with Dark Air Jammer, things like Urias and Spiderweb, you can create some really cool turn 5 combos, but I don't mind doing it on turn 5 so you get that nice turn 6 play. Plus, if you're going first, you have to wait till turn 5 a lot of the time anyway. So we've slowed things down a bit, so we get a good chance to just play the Dark Air Jammer out and flood the board a bit, but that ended up being their kind of tipping point. They decided, nope, I can't deal with that. Too many stats, obviously, and gave up. A little disappointed by how they just conceded. But as I said, I am going to include at least 3 videos for this one, so the next one is Portal. I believe this again, unfortunately, was a reasonably early concede, mostly mid-game. Usually, once you get your Vengeance going and you've locked down with Azazel, you'll notice that concedes happen more often than not, which is a little disappointing. They don't usually like to get past that point when you're playing with them, so they don't usually give me super crazy good games to show you guys, so I was a little disappointed with that. I think out of the 5 games I had, a couple were instant concedes for the 5 wins that I had out of probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 games. I won the majority, which was good when I was trying to make this video. But I'll definitely be using this deck pretty standardly just for doing my missions and stuff, so I'll get a better grasp on how well it is. And we might even do a revised video of this deck in the future, since we're going to be running out of content coming into the mini expansion. It's usually a little bit of downtime before mini expansion drops, so probably going to have a week or 2 where there just won't be a lot crazy going on. So Swarming Wraith, a good one again. We pretty much followed a similar line of play to last time. This time though, I decided to add a nice buff onto the Dark General. Trying to set up that nice buff Dark General. Actually, I can't remember if this was the concede game or the next one was, but either way, we should do alright here. This actually might be a pretty decent one. So they're spending an Evo point to remove our swarming. They don't want them taking any damage. Works out for us because it's a free Azazel turn. Even though Belf might have been better, I didn't want to put myself at 10 and then risk taking too much damage. At least this way they are forced to attack into us, which is fine with me. So both of these shouldn't be too much of a problem to deal with. We have the Entrancing Blow and the Diabolic Drain, both of which will do a wonderful job of picking these off. That or we can actually just trade, to be honest. We don't need to use both here. I probably could have went with Drain though and Spiderweb, but I think holding on to Drain wasn't a bad option, since it does potentially give us a good healing way. And it looks like we have forced them at least to play their Maisha out and waste an Evo. So now they're going to have a lot of trouble finding those finishes and getting me finished off, which is exactly what you want to put Portal into. If they can't reach their finishes, that's usually really important to winning the game. Their only real option now is to completely artifact me, and that's not going to be something I'm really going to let them do too easily.
Okay, this one's all me. Shall I grant your wish? This is my home. You are my food.
Soldier plane, not really a problem. Really, these artifacts are the only problem that we have to deal with here, with the Acceleradium going off. And overall, we've done some nice buffing to the Dark General, so while it's not super close, it's also not super far off from being game over. And I am deciding to go for a full board flood and a nice Hellblaze Demon play, getting that Dark General ever so much closer to winning us the game. So we're only 4 off lethal. We do have the Demonic Officer, which could put us right in the lethal range. But we still have a chance to go for lethal next turn. With another Dark General in our deck, a top deck would be ideal. So if I can get this nice top deck here, then we can finish this game on a high note. Otherwise, we're pretty much forced to play the Demon Officer, hope for next turn, and even go for Dark General then. Which at the moment was my plan. Going for that would have been the initial setup. But the Dark General, of course, top deck draw, perfect lethal. Can't really refuse that right there. So since the last one seemed to be the decent one I had, this one obviously would end up being another little disappointing concede, unfortunately. But it's still not a bad initial game. Since Vengeance Blood does rely pretty heavy on its first 5 turns to be decent, whereas the later game kind of snowballs itself without much issue, at least letting me show off those first few turns does give you guys an idea on what you want to go for and what you want to mulligan for and what kind of early turns you want to take. Because once you do get to those later turns, it really is just snowballing your cards in order and getting as much value out of them as you can get. There's no real crazy combination of cards that you could pull off. There's nothing of the sort that could do that. It's mainly just taking advantage of what you do have. So, Swarming Wraith again, one of my favourite plays early game. It's such a good card. And since it does easily counter the 2-1 here, it wasn't actually a bad option at all. So I don't really have anything else, so I decided to go for Urias. This is a controversial-ish type of play. Not many people just play out Urias as a 1-5 like that, but since I knew they weren't going to have an Evo yet, they're not really going to have too much that can counter him. I thought it'd be okay, since I can probably most likely take full advantage of his Evo this turn and go pretty nuts with the 5 damage to face. The only problem would have been if I wasn't able to survive. I would have missed out on that damage, but it still worked pretty well for us there. So I was definitely happy with how this deck performed. I played a fair bit of Vengeance Blood back when it was one of the very top decks, when it first started popping out with Belphegor and Soul Dealer and all those sort of cards, and really it still holds pretty well right now with these cards. Like I said at the beginning, all these cards are basically just improvements of old cards, which really does help it out, and basically just adding the buffing archetype instead with the Hellblaze and the Entrancing really does help it out a lot. So if you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to like button and subscribe. You'll find the deck list in the description below. But until next time, see ya. And before, of course, I fully cut this video off, I just want to say sorry that I do sound sick, as I've mentioned in the last couple of videos. I did come down with a cold. Get that out of the way. Might still be a problem for the next few videos. Have to wait and see if I make them soon or if I make them a few days from now, and if I get better in that time. But hopefully you guys can bear with me until then. See ya.